to the warning to the working class video I made. So, for anyone who jumps on the fascist rhetoric as a young person, obviously upon further inspection, I probably sounded contextually tone deaf, not acknowledging O'Brien is not right, to say the least. But this video is meant to expand upon my warning to the working class, not necessarily backpedaling. So Vaushs made comments about Sean O'Brien being a fascist, which after thinking about this language that's been dividing and judging people where I've agreed many times, I've decided to do research on this man. And Vaushs has a point, uh, uh, about him not being a good person for the Union, but not necessarily a fascist. uh, like this dude is actual scum. Sean O'Brien, I mean. So, going over this criticism here, as you'll see, Teamsters exec announces challenges to O'Brien after RNC speech. So, Vaushs mentioned this already, and, I was kind of put off by the magnitude of his language with everything being a fascist, yada yada. But yes, this dude is an actual piece of shit. So, the reasons for the challenges, which I think is a weird word to be using when it comes to what he's actually done. So, Palmer says this all culminated in his presence at the anti-union, anti-worker Republican National Convention, kissing the ring of a man that scabbed a picket line, failing to pay workers, discriminating against people of color as a landlord, falsely accusing 5 black men in New York of murder, orchestrating an insurrection against the United States, which, that sounds like the only fascist thing so far, in my opinion. Because Trump did that, but there's a lot more like strongman vibes in terms of where he is and the positioning. Anyways, uh, dodging the draft and appointing union busters from the Jones Day law firm to create the most anti-union labor board in history, Palmer wrote. So, I don't think it's right to overblow the racism as immediately fascist, but I shouldn't be surprised that unions have been seeping in ironic class division, racism, sexism, etc. Whether it was using identity politics for or against to bring in minorities, there may have been a corrupting neoliberal layer over unions and class solidarity, which led to this guy being allowed to be involved in unions. Like, this is a part of the status quo, not necessarily a fascist. On the other hand, if Sean O'Brien wasn't a gross person openly, it's not against leftist principles, IMO, to suck it up and work with people you don't like or agree with. Obviously, it's different once it's Sean O'Brien level of open criticism in the workforce, and this dude should just be in jail, and, but you can't quit your job over opinions you don't agree with. So this is not even about Sean O'Brien anymore. This is just a critique of my leftist principles because I see it in myself anyways. Anyways, it's a different story if it's consistent harassment and bullying, but someone talking shit about you is not justification to leave outright. Sean O'Brien isn't right for the team at all, it seems. Like, beyond not right. Like, he's evil. But Vaushs doesn't have a proper dial for this. Everything is a red flag to him, and this is how calling everything a fascist got us Trump. Because there's no nuance to bad people and bad things. Just labeled the most extreme scenario and killing the meaning, where nobody took it seriously anymore. But I still think Trump's radical base, they don't give a fuck if he's fascist or not at this point. Although he did have to deny the radical shit in Project 2025, so maybe he is leaning anti-authoritarian when he was trying to act like he wasn't involved in that. Alright, so leftists like Vaushs, and indeed I see this in myself as well, tend to see malicious activity in anything based on historical events. It's true, you could fall down the rabbit hole of everything being slave picked and tired workers grinded to the bone But where would you turn this negativity off, and is it justified? I think we clearly aren't built for the benefit of the species as a whole, but our terraforming is the problem, not the number. On the other hand, when it comes to hypocrisy, getting back to the point here, we have the RNC bringing in a unionizer, no matter who, including, as it says right here, uh, Palmer argued that it's naive to believe that people who attended the RNC will support unions in any way, shape, form, or manner. So, unionizer no matter who, including union busters. In the other corner, Vaushs for years funneling leftists uh, to vote Democrat no matter who, including Biden, who pissed off railway workers by screwing unions and cutting workers. So I'm not justifying Sean O'Brien anymore. This is not even about him. Obviously, he was just the segue to this. So Biden just knifed labor unions in the back. They shouldn't forget it. It's sad, really. The beleaguered labor unions of America thought they had really finally found a true friend in Joe Biden. They had a man who was most pro-union president in my lifetime, a low bar to clear. But something, yet this week we found out that when the fight got hard, Biden had the same thing to say about working people that his Democratic predecessors had for decades. Quote, "You'll never get anything if you want if I don't win, but once I win, you can't do the things you need because then I wouldn't be able to win again." Is this Biden being like old and just saying the quiet part out loud or something? Like, what? At the same time that thousands of union members are fanned out across the state of Georgia, knocked on doors to get Raphael Warnock elected and solidify Democratic control of the Senate to save the working class, of course, Biden decided to sell out workers in a single biggest labor battle of his administration, rather than allowing the nation's railroad workers to exercise their right to strike. He used his power to intervene and force them to accept a deal that a majority of the workers found to be unacceptable. His ability to do this rests on the vagaries of the Railway Labor Act, but all you really need to understand is this. Nobody forced him to side with the railroad companies over the workers. This was a choice. The White House just weighed the political damage it anticipated from Republicans screaming about the Christmas season rail strike against the fact that railroad workers have inhuman working conditions and would need to go on strike to change that, and chose the earliest political route. This was which side are you on moment, and Biden made his position clear. What are these railroad workers fighting for? Paid sick leave, the basic ability to call in sick or go see a doctor without being penalized, something that many of us, including members of the Congress and railroad company executives, take for granted. It is also, by the way, a right that Joe Biden believes should be codified into federal law, but he must not believe in it at all that much, since he just cut the legs out from under unions who were trying to secure it from their members. And this is just another so the red carpet for Republicans. So Democrats have always pretty much done this. And why it's so difficult to win the basic. Okay. Crap. Where was I? Okay. So greed and nothing more. The combined power of the railway unions could overcome this obstacle, but only if they had the ability to go on strike. Railroad companies are not stupid. They knew the White House would intervene to prevent a strike, so they felt no urgency to give in to their workers' demands. Joe Biden, Mr. I Love Unions, unilaterally disarmed the unions before their fight could begin. Sorry, without a credible strike threat, they never had a chance. People will point out that strikes are disruptive. Yes, that's the point. A rail strike would be so disruptive that the rail companies would have given up the sick days to prevent it. And if they didn't, the White House could have weighed in on the side of the workers to make them. Instead, it did the opposite, and rescuing hope for these workers fell to Bernie Sanders and to progressives in the White House, who forced congressional leaders to move a separate bill to guarantee the sick leave they were asked for. As usual, it was the left that went to the trouble of fighting for labor unions after the party's mainstream sold it out for the sake of convenience. Organized labor is in an abusive relationship with the Democratic Party for decades. Democratic administrations have failed to prioritize labor issues and stabbed unions in the back, and the union establishment has always showed up with a big check for them in the next election. I guarantee you that this will happen again after this betrayal of Joe Biden. By Joe Biden, sorry. You may have already noticed the few union leaders have been brave enough to criticize the White House directly on this issue. Breaking free from this dynamic does not mean getting friendly with the Republicans, who would happily bring back indentured servants and child labor if they could. Oh, so true. It means going left, to the only part of the political spectrum that genuinely gives a damn about the interests of working people, rather than pouring its considerable resources into the mainstream Democrats. The labor movement should be bankrolling the expansion of the progressive wing of the party to permanently shift the internal balance of power. This is not the same a reified ideological prescription from a textbook. It is common sense. If you are a railroad worker, or anyone who understands the basic need for solidarity among all workers in the face of corporate power, where are your friends? They are all sitting on the left. If we keep running back to support those who just kicked sand in our face, nothing will ever change. And instead of kissing and making up with Joe Biden after his outrageous insult, Labor should be putting the fear of God in him with the possibility that they will back a primary presidential challenge from the left in 2024, which possibly with Kamala, I don't know. Biden is very old and not very popular. He has been a friend to unions, yes, but if he goes against them on the biggest fight of all, how much of a friend is he, really? Nothing has as much potent power, a latent power, as organized working people. We need to stop begging politicians for their support and make them come beg for ours. Just because the strike is illegal, after all, doesn't mean that it can't happen. So, sadly, this vote no matter who nonsense is just a preference for flavors for who screws you, obviously. What changed my perspective is something I touched on already, but to reiterate, it's a myth liberal and leftist women only get abortions. Militant pro-life women aside, pro-life women also seek abortions depending on the situation, though historically they're pushed under the rug, and black and brown women are blamed for the disproportionate children. It's slightly an orchestrated black and white opposite ideology that the media strings our perception along to judge right-wing women. So, reading this article here, when it comes to abortion, conservative women aren't a monolith. So, corrections and clarifications. This story has been updated. Okay. Nearly 1 in 4 women in the USA will have an abortion by the age 45, according to the American Journal of Public Health. And they don't all share the same values and political views, obviously. Political stigma can make it difficult for any woman to talk about her abortion, but the particular pressures facing conservative women mean that stigma often equals silence. Quote, Republicans don't have fewer abortions than Democrats or liberals or anarchists or communists. It's that our political rhetoric paints people who have abortions as largely the same. Poor women, young women, irresponsible women, women who hate children, said Amanda Reyes, president of the Yellowhammer Fund, which provides funding for women seeking access to any of Alabama's 3 abortion clinics. It's gotten us to the point where we can't see the fact that we're all having abortions, and we're doing it for reasons we personally think matter. And that's all that matters. Pro-life women aren't having abortions. Pro-life women are having abortions too. If you just read the headlines, it would seem Democrats are on one side or the other of the abortion debate, and Republicans are on the other. But the issue is more complicated and less partisan than one might think. Polling shows about a third of the Republicans say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. According to Pew Research Center, and more than half of Republican women support keeping Roe v. Wade, according to polls in 2018 from the public opinion research firm Perry Undem, whose clients include Planned Parenthood and the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Health. Nearly 90% of voters say they would support a friend or family member if they had an abortion. In 2019, 4 states enacted abortion bans after 6 weeks of pregnancy, and Alabama passed a law banning abortions except for when the mother's health is at risk. Quote, if you look at the national polling, this isn't where the Alabama public is, and it frankly isn't even where mainstream Republicans are, said Debbie Vaushs, director of the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers University. Quote, the harshness of it is pretty shocking. Lawmakers accept the bans will lead to lawsuits that could push the Supreme Court to consider overturning Roe v. Wade, which obviously this article happened in 2019, just reiterating this by the way, which recognizes a woman's constitutional right to abortion. And in Roe v. Wade, it wouldn't end abortion. This is what would happen next. The bills have received vocal support from many conservative women. Okay, Alabama's near total ban stands at the powerful testament to Alabamians' deeply held belief that every life is precious and that every life is a sacred gift from God, said Republican Governor Kay Ivey, who signed the most restrictive abortion law in the nation this month. Other conservative women, even abortion opponents, find such laws draconian. South Carolina State Representative Nancy Mace is a Republican who is against abortion, but she said she was stunned by the lack of compassion her colleagues showed when they voted to pass a 6-week fetal heartbeat abortion ban without excluding exceptions for rape and incest. She introduced an amendment to the bill, and in the pair of 10-minute floor speeches, she cited her personal experience as a rape victim. It was the first time in 25 years that she had spoken publicly about her rape at 16, which she said was perpetuated by someone she believed was a friend. Okay, so from Nancy Mace. As a victim of sexual assault, I understand how being raped is not something that a woman can simply shake off. In my case, it was a traumatizing event I will never forget. Sexual assault should not be a partisan or political issue. I hope and pray any woman or teenager who is raped or a victim of incest would choose life, but I'm not going to take the choice away from them. Yesterday, the South Carolina House of Representatives passed the fetal heartbeat bill, and along with it, my amendment allowing exceptions resulting from rape or incest. I am grateful for the compassion my colleagues showed in passing this amendment in broad bipartisan support. Quote, I was gripping the podium so hard I thought I was going to pull it out of the floor, Mace said. I was angry at the language my colleagues were using. They were saying rape was the fault of women. They called these women baby killers and murderers. That language is so degrading towards women, particularly victims of rape and incest. And I said to myself, I'm not going to put up with that bull. I was nearly yelling into the mic. I gave a very passionate speech to my colleagues, and that is what got the exception through. Then she was chastised. State Representative Josiah Magnuson put a card from Personhood South Carolina, an anti-abortion group, on Mace's statehood desk that read, it is a twisted logic that would kill the unborn child for the misdeed of the parent. Mace said most Republican men at the highest level are anti-abortion, though they make exceptions. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, a state that banned abortion when a fetal heartbeat is detected, providing no exceptions for rape or incest, said he supported exceptions. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said the same. I don't see them being attacked for having the same position, May said. The only difference is I'm a woman and I'm a victim of rape, and you would think that would be a legitimate voice in the discussion of abortion in South Carolina and across the U.S. Not only is it difficult for Republican women to speak about abortion, but also but it's also becoming nearly impossible for Republican female politicians to get elected unless they're unequivocally anti-abortion, Walsh said. Quote, it's become harder and harder for pro-choice Republican women or men to get elected because in the primaries the most conservative voters are who show up, Walsh said. All right. In the Senate, there are two Republican women who support abortion rights. Senator Suzanne Collins, Representative of Maine, and Susan Lisa Kurtzkowski, Republican in Alaska. In the House, there's none. Conservative politicians aren't the only ones who struggle with stigma. Last year, Jenna King Shepherd hosted a get-together at her home. It was intended as a coming out of sorts. There would be wine and cheese, but the conversation would be anything but light. King Shepherd decided she would tell the 25-year-old woman the 25 woman she invited from her company of Guttinsville, Alabama, how she had an abortion at 17. Damn. King Shepherd hoped to persuade the woman to vote on Amendment 2, which would add language to Alabama's constitution, making it the state policy to recognize and support the sanctity of unborn life and the right of unborn children, including the right to life. All the women RSVP'd yes on the day of the gathering. Excuses trickled on. One woman said her husband didn't want her to attend. Another said although she supported what King Shepherd was doing, she couldn't risk people recognizing her car in the driveway. Of the 25 women who said they'd come, only 2 showed. I mean, that's not too surprising. Like, everybody's, like, paying attention to who you are within the community. Okay. In November, Amendment 2 passed. I felt frustrated and defeated, she said. It feels like an uphill battle, and she can never be won because you're dealing with culture, and how do you fix that? Because it's systemic. I just think it speaks to the stigma here. In the South, it's okay to support abortion as long as the people don't know. Wow. King Shepherd grew up in Guttinsville, which she described as a town with a church on every corner. Her father is a Baptist preacher. Abortion was never discussed at her home. She was a conservative, identified as a Republican, and she did all she could to fulfill her family's expectations of a good Southern girl. Alright. I should probably move on because, oh man, I'm sorry guys. My tablet is gonna have this weird memory issue. So, we get the picture with conservative women having to literal walk a tightrope when it comes to their culture. And they need to be able to speak out, and the media has to be able to point out that it's not just liberals and leftists, but you'll never have that spin. They'll only be showing like conservative women being anti-abortion always because of to spin this political division. So that being said, conservatives might want to join a union, but the Democrats and Republicans, bought and paid for by billionaires, putting the globe into debt, won't allow it. Vaushs should know this. And the normies might only hear right-wingers are only fascists that don't want unions. So, despite Sean being trash and the status quo not giving a care, Vaushs, depending on how far he wanted to go, could make the same argument for generalizing conservative women to say something like, quote, yes, remove my organs and place any child you like inside, end quote. Probably in a baby fundy voice. So, true as this might be in reality for some, it wouldn't be a justification to take away their reproductive freedom, like busting unions for others isn't justified by calling every Republican a fascist just because we have Sean O'Brien representing this ideology to them. Alright. That's all I wanted to say.